What kind of input did you get from Phil?
I got quite a bit. I think there are some directors that are very laissez-faire, and they might just tell a composer, well, you know, here's some areas I want some music, these scenes, do whatever you think and whatever. But Phil had a total vision of this film that was really quite realized in his head. And so when we spotted the film, he had definite ideas in each scene, whether he wanted music or not, and what the function of music was supposed to be emotionally in that scene. And we talked about each scene at length. For some scenes, he had what's called temp tracks, where he would have grabbed a hold of some music from other sources that would give some of the feeling of what he was looking for, which is actually quite helpful to a composer, in that I think that properly a film composer's role is akin to being a police artist, in that the final film is the suspect, and the director is the witness who saw this thing, and he's telling the police artist, well, what that suspect looks like. And the police artist's job is to try to draw a picture that looks as much like this person. In this case, I've got to come up with music that as closely resembles what Phil is hearing in his head, at least to function emotionally the way he is hearing this music. And so a good police artist in the film industry is able to do something that pleases the director and hopefully, secondarily, pleases himself. But your first job is to please the director. I consider myself really lucky that I ended up pleasing us both. And that was a big thrill for me. And so we spotted the whole film, and then I was given a videotape of the film at that point, and it's pretty much finished form, although they tweaked it a little bit, and some scenes changed, you know, by a few seconds or a fraction of a seconds here and there. The music editor gave me the sheets for the different scenes, and then I set about composing music for the different scenes, and each scene that you compose is called a cue. And as I would finish each cue, I would take this music to Phil, or he would come to my studio, and we would play the videotape of that scene, and I would play a demo of that cue for him to essentially get his blessing, that I was on track, that he liked that. And then I would go ahead, and if it was a particular cue that would use the symphony, I would send the tape demo down to Greg McRitchie in L.A., he would start looking at it. We would have long conversations on the telephone back and forth about this measure and that measure and what did I want here and what did I want there. And then he would do the orchestration for that scene if it were called for. There were other scenes that were purely acoustic small group instrument kinds of cues.
So the demos that you did for Phil were mainly acoustic, electronic?
Yes, they were all. I didn't really ever have the orchestra play in a provisional way. It's just too expensive to do something like that. So I would mock up using the synthesizers and other kinds of outboard gear and other keyboard instruments the best representation of what I felt that cue would be like, get Phil to listen to it, and then if he liked it, I would then go and either arrange a small group session to formally record that, or if it was just going to be electronic by myself, I would then set about doing a definitive recording in my studio of that cue, or I would send it down to Greg McRitchie to orchestrate.
So some of the music was recorded up here in Marin County?
Yes, some in my own studio, and some of it in various studios here in the Bay Area, where I would gather small groups of musicians together to do a particular cue.
You mentioned temp music earlier. Do you know what kind of temp music he used?
Oh, he had things from all kinds of sources. They were 20th century musical sources.
Was it classical music
yes.
or film music?
Yeah, classical music.